what does the future hold with design thinking at play, specifically in the areas of trending, timely topics like artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, and sustainability? I know it's quite a long question.
That's a big one.
Yes.
Absolutely, and a very good one. So in an age of artificial intelligence, machine learning, bots, and all the rest, you know, machines can take over a lot of our physical work, and now they can take over a lot of our intellectual work, the thinking. But what they can't take over is the intrapersonal and interpersonal work that we actually do. Another thing that they're not very good at, unstructured situations and the genuinely new. So like ChatGPT, for example, am I worried as an author that I'm not going to be able to publish any more books because ChatGPT is just going to write all the books? Well, no, I'm not, because it'll summarize what's already out there, but it doesn't write anything new. Same with design thinking. DT is all about sensing needs and desires and creating revolutionary, hopefully, ways to serve them. And again, AI doesn't do so well when there's no data. That's when you use design thinking. And when you don't really understand the problem, so how would you ask your AI a question? You start with design thinking and maybe use artificial intelligence a bit later. So acquiring these DT skills can help humanize your work and future-proof your career.
That's a great answer, and I'm sure it's on the same line of thinking that a lot of creatives have. For instance, writers, they will always know that they can have confidence in their own skills as a human with their own unique human perspective to offer, because as you rightly said, it's a generative tool. They need some data to go by. So at the end of the day, it's a tool that is only as good as the person, the user wielding it. So that's where DT comes in. And it's really reassuring.
And if you've been following the UK writers' strike, they're upset because they write stuff and then the AI uses it. So we really haven't worked out, you know, the intellectual property rights and citing others' work, yada, yada, yada. So yeah, at the moment, nobody's worried that the creatives are going to be replaced by the AI, but we are kind of concerned that it's going to grab our work and sell it and not give us any income or any credit.
And I think it's also how people perceive the AI tool as well. People who are not the generator of content, for instance, on that side of things. That's a really fascinating topic to kickstart the conversation. So on that note, I wanted to ask my next question to Supria, actually, and actually to CJ as well, but I'll ask Supria first. So where does DT play in our future of work?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, Adeline. And I think really when we talk about the future of work, really to simplify it, it's about how our jobs, competencies, workspaces, workplaces, and really our cultures are evolving, right? And all of this conversation started around the pandemic, and that's caused the sort of big reset for us. Personally, I feel like these gaps already existed. It just helped us to uncover these gaps and become more proactive as HR professionals and as organizations to what the changing and evolving expectations of our people are. And so in that sense, design thinking fits in right very well with when we talk about the future of work. So sharing some real-time examples of how that's helped us personally is obviously in most organizations currently, you can see that there is hybrid working, there's working from anywhere in the world that you would like that. Of course, we have that too. But it's also given us an opportunity to be able to apply guiding principles of design thinking, for example, to think about how we want to completely rethink the way we've been working. So one of the things that we recently did was come up with a global distribution model within the organization that helps our people to work in any teams, geographies, or verticals across our business globally, right? So I could be 50% of the time CEO of a certain business, and my other 50% of my time I'm working on a specific client, right? Those are the kind of things we weren't sort of thinking about in the past, and we now are. So that's just amazing. And the other thing I feel like is that a lot of the changes and improvements that we've been able to bring about, they have been successful because behaviors like creative bravery or listening to your people or to your clients is embedded within the culture of the organization. Surely companies that don't have that culture embedded, or that's not something that's authentically coming from their people and what their people need, or they're just doing this because it's a trend or because your competitor's doing it, you would find that those processes or improvements are not very well received, or they're not successful because your people don't feel like in the things and the changes that you're making, it doesn't make them feel like they're being seen and they're being heard, right? So in summary, I would say design thinking is a big, sort of guiding principle and tool for us, that we keep thinking about everything that we are doing, that it's embedded within the needs of our people, that it's making their lives easier, and it's something that they want. It's not being done because, oh, someone else is doing it.
And what you're saying actually leads me to my next question, which is how large a role will DT design thinking play in employee experience, for instance?
It plays a big role there, right? Because employee experience is all about tapping into the needs of your people, understanding, how the entire life cycle of your people works, through the time that they join your organization and to the time that they leave. So as people teams, very, very, very mindful about identifying those points in your careers where we make a conscious effort of heightening experiences, that identifying those moments that matter. And one of the things that I think personally for me really is something that I keep reminding ourselves and our teams when we work, is being conscious of desired paths that people have been used to, when they're approaching certain processes or doing things a certain way. There are times that you think that you're responding to your people needs and you're coming up with this really great new process that's going to make everyone's life easier, and you find that, okay, it's not really that well received. Perhaps this change is, seemingly more disruptive to people than welcomed. And that's where you're starting to think about why this is so, and how can you bring those iterative improvements, having tested those processes real time. So surely you can't think about heightening your employee experiences if it's not embedded in capturing their needs and involving your people in designing the process throughout, the entire cycle, and then making sure that it's not like done and dusted, but continuously improved.
Those
Absolutely.
are really good points.
If I can build on that,
Yes, please.
A big mistake that technology folks like myself make is called the shiny tech syndrome. All right, you can design some tech, and you've got tech that gives amazing new capabilities, and you think that everybody's going to fall in love with it and want to use it. They won't. They really don't care. People care about the things they're trying to get done today. So if you can understand people deeply and what really are the needs and desires, then you can use new tech. But like telecom and IT and the ability to do virtual teams has been around for decades. I did a doctoral thesis on it in the 90s. Come on. Did anybody want to do virtual teams or this that we're doing right now with Zoom? No. Only when people had a burning platform and had to try something new and apparently uncomfortable, only then did they do it. And in terms of the future of work, I've been messing around with FOW and future of education for a while now, and I dug into the World Economic Forum lists of skills for business people in the future and articles and whatnot, and I put all these skills for 2030 on my desk, and it's like some school threw up on my desk. So, I'm pushing this stuff around and theming it, and it came up to skills of doing today's business and creating tomorrow's business, skills of thinking, creative and logical, skills of being intrapersonal and interpersonal. And it shocked me that the biggest bubble was being. And so when we make our infrastructures for work, we have to be aware of, number one, what kind of work are we going to be doing in future? And number two, design the physical and virtual infrastructures that really make people productive, and they know how they're most productive. So don't put a book author in an open office. Don't make your salesperson be only virtual. Yeah, and give them some choice for how to do this as well. So the collaborative design thinking type process needs to happen for future of work as well.
Wow, those are some really good points to mull over, brought up by both CJ and Supria. And what I'm hearing a lot about DT is how much of an evolutionary type of methodology it is. And actually, my next question is mostly for CJ, but Supria, please feel free to add on your thoughts about that as well. So, there are so many ways to practice design thinking. And as I said before, very popularly, the 5-principle, or rather 5-stage model of design thinking is often applied. Would you say that that is still the standard practice of DT, or has that changed even along with the evolutionary?
It's one of them. Oh boy, you didn't want to hear that. But yeah, I mean, I take corporates through workshops with a 6-stage process used by like IDEO, the design consultancy. And it begins with choosing and right sizing your challenge, which people totally forget. They love to rush off and solve the wrong problem very well. But still, it's the wrong problem. Come on. So, IBM has an infinity type design methodology. There's the 5-step out of Stanford D School. There's the 6-step out of IDEO, yada, yada, etc. What they all have in common is they begin with getting out there and observing and understanding the people for whom you're designing. Then they go to trying to create something radical if possible. It could be evolutionary, that's fine, depends on what you're trying to do. And then about half of it is prototyping and putting it in front of people and taking feedback and trying things. Truth is, the Stanford D School is moving beyond the 5-step process. So when I was trying to present their process in my book, they're like, no, we don't do that anymore. And I'm like, no. So what they're doing now is abilities that you draw on, key abilities to build up and draw on at particular times in the particular process you're going through. So it's like a recipe. You need a recipe when you start to learn to cook. So you go through this 5 steps or 6 or whatever.
Yes.
And then you start messing around, adding things, you become a pretty good cook. Pretty soon you don't need recipes. You're creating totally new dishes and you're writing recipes for other people. So when you begin, you probably need a recipe, a process, but then don't be afraid to let it go and to become someone who designs processes or approaches for other people.
That is really exciting. It's very much in the spirit of DT itself, actually.
Yeah, we're innovating how to innovate.
Yes, definitely. Supria, anything to add on that?
No, I think I also agree with CJ on when she says that, you don't typically day to day in a work environment, you're not thinking about it very intentionally about, oh, am I applying the design thinking principles here? But surely for any process, any improvement that you bring about for your people, it has to start with their need. They have to be involved in the process throughout. That prototyping, testing, iterative approach towards everything that we do is hugely important. And I like the way that CJ mentioned, once you've sort of perfected the recipe, then you start, to evolve it. It takes a, shape and form of its own, and it becomes something that you didn't expect to. To give you a real-time example about that, very like last year, as a part of my inclusion, equity, diversity work, we started to tap into our people's voices around putting together a business employee resource group focused on the LGBTQIA plus community, right? So a great topic to talk about, especially since it's Pride Month and we're in June. So the group was started because our people wanted it, because members of the community wanted that representation. They wanted a forum, they wanted a group to come together and share ideas on. And when we started it, we were very mindful about having it to be not just an employee resource group, but a business employee resource group, so that the group feels empowered enough to then start influencing business, influencing the work that we do with our clients, and potentially start influencing our clients as well in terms of what they're doing. And as the journey sort of started to evolve, and there was a lot of new ideas and new things that started to come out of the group, we're so happy to see now, a year down the line, that we're having close partnerships with our clients and our work spilling over into their campaigns and their work, and sort of that synergy has taken a new shape and form. But it's very much grounded within the deep representation of the community, where now it's become a mandate for us to, when we do any work, that is relevant to the community, that there's representation, not just in front of, but behind the camera. So in the teams from within the organization that they're working on that campaign need to be truly representative of the community. And that's where the work comes through, and then the work has that quality and that resonance with your audience. And thereby comes the awards and the accolades and the business success, right? But all of that started with being authentic and tapping into the needs of the audience that truly resonates with it. And if we didn't do any of that and just came up with it in a spirit of tokenism, or having to do something because it's Pride Month, we're going to tick that off, then you'd find that those initiatives don't take off, or people don't connect with them. Right. So yeah, very much so in that sense.
Thank you for that.
Supria is just like so right. And it reminds me of something that business people try to do. They start with the viability, the perspective of the business, and they make what they want to make, and then maybe it's tech or whatever, and they try to push it on people. And they ask questions like, how might we make people do this? And as a designer, I just have to say, no, you're never going to make anybody do anything. And as a mother of teenagers, like, no, never going to happen. You got to find out what they want and give them a 10 times better way to achieve that. And I notice on the chat, there's a question about how a new startup can leverage design thinking to create a better employee experience right from the beginning, or an old and traditional organization with a large employee base. And whether it's customer experience or employee experience, you start with what they need and want. And if I remember correctly, Airbnb coined the term employee experience. And Supria, you just mentioned moments that matter, which come from marketing, moments of truth. So like, what are the moments that matter in the life cycle of your employee, whether you're a startup or a big company? It's the interview process, the onboarding, starting a project, finishing a project. It's also their life experience, having a baby, getting married, a death, changing their work location, promotion. These are moments that matter, that determine either whether an employee will take the job, perform on the job, and leave the job. So to answer that question and wrap up for startups, there's a reason startups get more funding if they have designers in the leadership team or on the board. And that's because they're going to make damn sure that the company is focused on what the customer needs and wants. And if they want customer experience, good customer experience, which goes with good employee experience, they're also going to pay attention to the employees, because those two go together. If you want to make sales, make revenues, make profits, design this well.
Thanks for that Dr. CJ. So for those who are not reading the question in the chat box, this is for both. This question that Dr. CJ just answered is for both CJ and Supria, where it says, will be good to hear your thoughts on how a new startup can leverage design thinking to create a better employee experience right from the beginning. The same goes, same question for an old and very traditional organization with a large employee base. So it's very much what you were talking about as well, Supria. Anything to add for this question?
Yeah, I think for both kinds of organizations, it's about tapping into the needs and desires of your people, right? So if you're a small startup, I think you have the great opportunity of not having the excess baggage of scale. So I would say small organizations don't need to adhere to a lot of processes and get caught up in the hierarchy of things. So it's easy, and the small teams can get involved in what matters to them and what they personally resonate with, or what's going to add value to their lives, and then create their own and make their own rules in that sense. In larger organizations, things can take a little bit longer, but I think it depends entirely upon the culture within the organization. So personally for us, even though we are large, the culture itself and just being in a creative space means that the rule of the business is to be bold, to be creative, to be fast, to be agile, and to keep adapting, keep changing. There are no bad ideas, creative bravery is encouraged. So if culturally, you have the right elements embedded, then even though you're a large organization, you can still be highly adaptive, and you can still do things pretty, bring in the efficiencies into work. And larger doesn't always mean that it's slower, right? And we've seen that across the world. So I think then the culture plays a big role there.
And whether you're working on a new product or service, or a customer experience, or an employee experience, you can use design thinking for both radical and routine. You can design something that's 10 times better than what we're doing today, or 10% better. But usually the advice that I give is this, from disruptive strategy. If you're a startup, make damn sure your product or service is 10 times better, because that's what it's going to take for people to try you out. But once they do, make sure you switch to routine innovation to make it a little better, a little better, and a little better. And that can also be done with design thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. CJ is right. It doesn't have to be about some big changes. Sometimes it's just like everyday small things. Like I'm sat on a chair right now, and we're looking at new chairs for this meeting room. And there are 5 chairs here with all marked. Like for this month, we're testing these 5 chairs, use all of them, tell us which chair works best for you. And that's the one that's going to be ordered. So it's something that's small, but anyone using the room feels like they have a chance to influence, decisions, even though they're so small.
And you're prototyping the experience before you go big and roll it out. And that's a huge lesson from design thinking.
As you both mentioned, it's a very iterative process. And actually, you've both already started to answer my next question, which is about employee engagement and how relevant DT would be in such a topic. And it seems from your answers really pretty relevant.
Supria, do you wanna?
Yeah, I could jump into that first. In terms of employee engagement, obviously all of that begins with ensuring that you're going and having those conversations with your people throughout the year, right? So now whether that's by a survey that you repeat twice a year, whether that's through listening sessions that you hold every quarter, or other forums that are very much a part of your culture, on a regular basis. So the first thing is ensuring that you have those opportunities to tap into your people's voices. And then design thinking plays a big role, because as we've talked about this multiple times, ensuring that your people are involved in every step of it, so anything new that you're coming up with, right? So last year we came up with a completely new career architecture for the organization, which is in a sense allows our people or offers our people various opportunities, various possibilities in which they could grow their careers and utilize the different growth opportunities, thereby to build an authentic personal brand that works for them. So the control in that sense is totally passed over from management or HR, so to say, to your people. So everyone is controlling their own narrative and taking control of how they want to grow their career in whichever direction they'd want to do that, and what kind of learning tools they'd want to take advantage of in pursuit of that career goal, right? So when you're thinking about talent management and learning and development, as well, design thinking thereby plays a role into it. If you're designing anything in isolation in a closed office, without involving your people, you can be sure that it's not going to resonate with them.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, when I hear the Gallup engagement studies that show us that, you know, how much of our workforce globally is either not engaged or actively disengaged, and it comes up to like 85%. This costs $7.8 trillion to the global economy every year. And I'm like, oh my God, you know, one first step is to find out from the actual workers themselves why and what is it that you would want. Now, that also brings up a key issue in design. Are you just taking orders from people? You're taking all their design suggestions and you put it together in a humbug? No. You're the one with the tech and the design knowledge. And even when you ask people what they need or want, they can't always tell you because they've never lived anything else. And that's also why empathy is something talked about in the design world so much, and we try actively to build it. There's a great CCL study on leadership. And you know, the question was, is empathy tied to superior business results of leaders? And yeah, very dramatically, the more empathetic your leader, the better your business results. And it's for these issues like this. And that relationship is even more pronounced in high power distance cultures like we face in Asia. So building empathy, understanding what people really need and want, and then being in a position to make changes. That doesn't always happen, but that's something your designers can help with.
Yeah, I agree with CJ. I mean, especially in the region in which we're operating here in APAC, it's so different from any other region globally because there is no standard POV across the region. Every market, every country is so unique. There's so many cultural sensitivities, undertones that you need to be, you know, conscious about. And therefore, having a differentiated approach, you know, is sort of a must.
Wow. So it seems that it's a resounding yes from both of you, that DT plays a huge part in employee engagement. So then my next question will be for the both of you as well, which is what are some use cases of DT in future of work that you've seen work to great success actually, or to some success?
Yeah, absolutely. If I can grab that one. So some of the ones that I bring up are from various parts of, you know, what happens to organizations and the people in them. I mean, like Dr. Reddy's Pharmaceuticals, for example, is a big pharma company, and they wanted to do a culture change. If any of you have ever tried to change an organizational culture, like, you know, the headache starts now, like, where do we start? But they took a design thinking approach and it actually worked. And DBS also has a design thinking approach. You know, they even wanted to change things like useless meetings, like making sure to have efficient meetings with an agenda and, you know, language around, should I really be here, and et cetera. Design thinking can change so many different pieces of what you do all day that then it adds up to a big change. You know, like virtual infrastructures as well. Procter & Gamble connected 30,000 R&D scientists and product developers worldwide, because what do they need? If you're trying to develop something over here, you need to know Do we already have something like that? Does anybody know about it? Can anybody help me in tens of thousands of people? So that kind of connectedness is something that DT helped with. There's also, like the Steelcase partnership with IDEO, the design firm, where they really have been rethinking in the future what are the physical, virtual, and social infrastructures that we need to put in place that people can use to then, in an informed way, design their own workflows and structures and how they work.
It seems that DT really helps us to ask all the right questions.
Oh, very much. And it helps with like M&A as well. Umpqua Bank. I mean, M&A and joint ventures are known for being fraught with failures. But,
Yes.
When two banks came together to make the largest credit union in their area, in their state, management had the DT guys go in and say, what are the needs and wants of this group of employees? What are the needs, wants, and practices of this group of employees? How can they mesh and not mesh? What do they care about? If we're going to mesh them, how would they be able to do that successfully?
Yes, that's right. And how about Supria? Do you have any use cases that come to mind that have used DT in future of work quite successfully?
Yeah, I think rather than talking about one use case, I think that in the 2 years that I've worked, even in my current organization, everything that's worked well or resonated with our people has been, the foundation has been into tapping the right needs, right? As CJ mentioned, it's not even about involve your people doesn't mean that the ideas come from them. It means that you're able to capture the right needs because it makes their life easier in some way. It solves a problem. It solves a need, whether or not it was uncovered at the onset or not. So there is a lot of work that goes into tapping those needs that are perhaps not uncovered in the beginning, or new ways of solving those problems that come up in the ideation stage. Or then down the line, lots of things are changed because you're continuously testing the process out. So I think a lot of things that have worked for us have been if we've stayed sort of true to solving the real problems and starting with the end in mind first, asking the correct why questions, and just checking throughout the process that this is working and testing it enough with a larger sort of audience. Having said that, there have been instances where even when you've done all of this, a process fails, right? So it's the real world that happens. For example, we had a process within the organization that helped our people, enable growth and performance, which involved like setting your priorities at the start of the year, your mid-year reviews, your 360 cycles, and your one-on-one manager conversations and all of that. Historically, that process used to run on a paper-based format. And then about 2 years ago, we developed an app in-house, with a partner, and it became like, we thought it's going to revolutionize and completely change things because you don't have to go anywhere looking for it. It was like a new app within your teams, and so it was going to be easily accessible. It's, there's no paper involved, there's no headache, there's no passing things around, and to be shocked with that, the engagement actually dropped with the process rather than going up. And that was an utter shock. But in the real world, that happens. So what do you do? What you do with that is that we didn't stop there, that we kept sort of finding out the reasons of why not. Why is it not working? What's missing in it? Perhaps the navigation is not right. Perhaps we don't have enough user tools and user videos embedded there. Perhaps the training sits somewhere outside the tool. How can we improvise it? How can we, make it better? We started to introduce very recently AI within that to capture learning needs so that managers are able to tap that in. They don't have to go anywhere else to sort of find that. So the idea is not to give up on it and to keep sticking with the process. And also to be aware that sometimes changes take time, and that people are used to certain desired paths, and it's not easy to change the way you do things over time. You have to have the patience to let that happen. And the other reality to always, sort of remember is that there could be certain factors outside of the process, macroeconomic factors, environmental factors, other cultural things that are impacting this process. And so even though you're doing things right and you have a well-meaning intent, it doesn't always land. And then the idea is to still go back to your core principles and stay at it. And then to keep finding reasons, and problems to solve, and making sure that the adaptation goes up. And then steadily it started to go up. And now I would say it's quite successful, but that's been a 2-year journey. So it didn't happen overnight, as most people involved in the process expected it to.
Yes.
Absolutely. And like you're bringing to mind another organization that had to keep everybody's spirits up while they go through this process. That is something that you have to do. And I cannot for the life of me remember the organization, but they were a service organization, and they started to do customer journey map. Okay, so let's map out all the different steps that a customer has to go through with all the different pieces of the business to get the service done.
Yes.
And they discovered that there was like 82 steps in the process. Oh no. And yeah, customers were so frustrated, they would just get up and leave. And the people who worked there, when they would see how much people did not like to deal with them, were so unhappy. They're like, oh no, we were so proud of what we did and thought we did such a great job. So it was important to, to boost the employee spirits and say, look, this is just an opportunity to improve. Yes, you have done a good job in the old system. And now we're going to make a better system so that it's easier on you and easier on them. And one of the things that employees realized in going through this was, hey, when I do something, I just hand it over there. Well, then what happens to it? So they started to have this whole systems view and started to care about the whole organization and how the whole organization serves a customer. And they did very well. They, like you said, they kept going, and they understood that failure is not negative feedback. Negative feedback is just a great thing to use. This whole journey is you only have a failure when you fail to learn, because you can always go back and make a change, make it better.
That's very nicely put. Thank you so much for the insights into the real world applications. I think, DT, we've established that is a very, very good methodology for applying in real life, actually. So now let's take some time for some questions and comments from the audience. So the floor is now open. If you would like to speak to our guest speakers, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. Otherwise, feel free to type your questions and comments in the chat box as well.
Yeah. Hello, Dr. Medows.
Hey.
Yeah, my question to you is that, to my knowledge, both the approaches, that is human-centric design thinking and user-centric design thinking, both requires practicing empathy, right? And both involves user research, user expectation, prototyping, and journey mapping. And both aims at, maximizing the usability, profitability, and increase the business value. So what is the major technical difference between both the approaches?
Oh, beautiful question. As a matter of fact, Adlin and I got into this the other day. The terms design thinking and human-centered innovation are used interchangeably. It's pretty much the same thing. Although I will say that although people think design thinking is something new, Peter Roth, or Rowe, I never get the name right, wrote the book Design Thinking. It came out of the Harvard School of Urban Planning and Architecture, I believe. That book came out in 1987. And solving problems, thinking like a designer was mentioned in Herb Simon's The Sciences of the Artificial in 1967. This is not new. And the diverge-converge technique that we use comes from creativity literature from 1947. So the two are interchangeable, and the tools and techniques actually have a long history, and they're still around because they still work. We didn't need to innovate those again. Uh-oh, you're on mute. My favorite thing to say.
Sorry. Okay. So like, what would be the deciding factors, while adopting the best approach, say while designing a product or a service, or say while designing an enterprise structure or a framework?
Well, obviously my approach in my book is the best. Sorry.
And we're going to
Really,
promote it a little bit more later on as well. We'll take a few moments later on.
I think you need to understand the type of team you're working with.
Yeah.
So, if you've got a beginning design thinking team with maybe one expert, you're probably going to want to take a pretty strict process. If you use the one that I use, which is Classic IDEO, that one starts with choosing the challenge. And I find that really for beginners, they will apply DT in the wrong circumstance. I mean, you want to use it where you have little or no data. It's a human complex problem and so forth. And the reason that data science and DT have been called the new power couple of 2022, it's no longer 2022, but anyway, Forbes wrote that back then, is because your data science can tell you what's wrong. And DT is where you send people out to find out why and what might we do about it. For example, if you're a hospital, people are missing appointments. We can see that, and we can see the rise in appointment misses. Okay, so let's send the people out. Well, it's people who don't keep a calendar. It's elders who can't get a ride, this, that, and the other. Yeah, so if you have a more experienced team, then you use the capabilities and the approach and let them be more fluid. If you're using, if the challenge is already set by someone who sets good challenges, do the 5-step process. You don't need to revisit your challenge, etc. So there you go.
Because sometimes when we look from the very holistic view, then there are chances, missing the target audience, sometimes we might miss the human demographics,
Well, but then you also have to be careful about for whom are you designing. And when you have those brilliant insights along the way, put them on a Post-it, stick them on the wall. That's your next project. Keep yourself focused. And as part of your DT team leadership, your leader has to keep you focused. And if you truly do find a better problem, that's fine. Or find that your problem really isn't a problem and you need to change your challenge, that's totally fine. You just have to keep your stakeholders aware and tell them why you believe that there should be a change in what you're working on.
Because in my maximum, I've seen that there is very much misalignment between the stakeholders and the end users.
Oh, that's why you pay the big bucks to some management person or leader that it looks like they're not doing anything at all, but really they're keeping the team focused and they're making sure the stakeholders are happy and understand all along the way. Another job of that lead might be to start with a challenge where the stakeholders are the user and start small so that they can see the power of the process and, hey, I got a radically better outcome here. Yeah, okay, let's do that on some bigger and bigger projects. You may have to use DT to sell DT within the organization.
Thank you so much for that very, very wonderful question. It was definitely
Good one.
very it led to lots of insights from Dr. CJ. So now we have one more
Thank you.
question. We have just over 5 minutes left in our session. So I think we have time for one more question in the chat box. Maybe Supriya, you would like to take this one. Beyond customer experience or employee experience, where else would you suggest for people to use DT? That's a very good question, actually.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think that it's used to solve business problems too. So I'll share with you a real-time example of when we were looking at the kind of work that we are doing as an agency. So we are not just a pure play agency, but also have several capabilities that work for us that we specialize in with data, tech consulting, and so on. And so when we're looking at our business and seeing where we are doing well and where we're not doing so well, it was, uncovered that perhaps we're not having, or our people are not having the capability to confidently plug in our capabilities within our creative work for which we are more well known to our clients, right? And from there, the understanding came about why that's not happening. Are they not, aware about the capabilities enough? And thereby started a learning series of building those 101 capability knowledge, which was for everyone in the agency, and then identifying a target audience, people who were in the growth teams, people who were in roles that were client facing, bring them into 201 sessions where they're going through the creds, they're practicing, they're simulating, they're going over use cases, real-time business problems, and then evolving to a 301 series where they're becoming super specialists within those areas, and ultimately started to unlock opportunities with our clients and had a real-time, business impact. So it's not always to heighten employee experiences, but embedding the whole process very much into the why of the problem, who's the end user, who are the people involved in the process, what are their challenges, how can we solve them, and then going through series of iterations with the 201, 101, 301 series and continuously improving that did bring, actual business results as well. So it's, in that sense, not just for employee experience.
That's
And
a great answer.
If I can build on that, once
Yes,
you've learned something about design thinking with articles, books, multimedia, whatever, it's really not something it's something you do. It's a skill. Like nobody wants to know how to be an artist. They want to learn how to be an artist and have
well
the
said.
skills.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So,
CJ is right in saying that once you start doing it so much so that you're not really thinking about it as much as it just becomes embedded within your culture.
Yeah,
Yes.
one of the things you can do to go beyond your organizational culture is head over to IDEO.org, which has publicly available challenges that are societal challenges that you can volunteer for to get some practice and do something good for society.